Hello and welcome back. We are with Dr. Randi Gunther. Dr. Randi Gunther, welcome. And I'm glad that you're here at our podcast.
It's always a pleasure to be on the other end of you.
And today we're going to talk about one of your articles called Regressions in Interpersonal Communications. And I know you published it at Psychology Today, and we're also found at our website. And so we're going to have a little bit of sharing of some of the insights, being you the author of this article.
I probably have written close to 40 articles on communication, all kinds of communication. And people make I statements and they learn how to listen better, and there are certain sort of glorified and well-touted processes that help you communicate better. But the one I'm going to talk about today is almost never spoken of. And from my point of view, probably one of the top 5 problems that people encounter in communicating with each other. So I thought it's really important to outline it and to let people know how often it happens and how destructive it can be in interaction between intimate partners. And I call it regression trauma, because there is none of us that has escaped trauma as a child. Some people have it really badly, of course, abuse, neglect, terrible things, but we can also have consistent trauma, like being on the under of a parent who never feels that we're good enough. And we internalize that feeling and we project that onto our relationships. So if people are close enough to each other to talk about severe trauma, or talk about a rape, or talk about something that happened that really destroyed an individual's sense of worth, and they know that about each other ahead of time, these regression traumas are much easier to identify in the process when they are communicating. But if people have withheld that information, or maybe it's intrinsic because it was before speaking, the other person doesn't know, this is what happens. People will be having an interaction of some kind. Maybe it's a little bit tense or a little bit stressful, but they're talking to each other. They're not more than a few feet away. They're kind of listening to one another's viewpoints. They're trying to understand. And then one partner says something. Facial expression, words, voice intonation, physical positioning, and the other person stops talking to the person and starts talking at the person. Because what is happening is that person's demeanor, or the sound of their voice, or the phrases they've used, hits that person in a trauma that they have either not dealt with or not expressed to their partner in some way, or not even aware of. Their voice becomes shrill, and they literally drop down into the age they were when that trauma occurred. There was a very famous psychological leader many years ago, Norman Cousins at UCLA, who said to his 3-year-old granddaughter who was taking the binky away from her new baby, "Why are you acting like a baby?" And she looked at him and said, "Because I am a baby, stupid." Because she was feeling 1-year-old, not feeling 3 years old and grown up. So what happens is a person regresses, and they regress. They're not acting 6 years old. They actually regress to being 6 years old. And so now they are treating their partner as the person who hurt them, as the person who traumatized them. They're projecting it onto that partner. And we will have some examples, a few at the end, which will very well help. The partner, of course, can be, number one, triggered into his or her own regression on the other end of that kind of attack, or just defend, or worse than that, invalidate. "I'm not doing that to you. That's not really what's happening. Why are you accusing me of that? You're being too dramatic. You're acting in ways I've never seen you act before." And there is the danger of that person acting like the person who traumatized them. So you can actually re-traumatize in the moment. But the person isn't experiencing you as a grown-up person. That person is experiencing you as the age they were when the trauma occurred. And so what happens is people completely lose each other. They start yelling from a distance. As I said, they're talking at each other, not to each other. There's no capability for resolution because the original trauma was not resolved. So that's what regression trauma in intercommunication is. That pretty much sums it up.
Now, you talked about how it happened and recognizing it. How do couples recognize that when it's happening, and how can they help each other when
Well,
that
those
happens?
are, those are really deeply important questions. First of all, if it doesn't activate the regression trauma of the other person, so they don't become defensive, and they realize that that person has shifted, they don't feel mature, they don't feel in the present, they feel like something else is happening. If they cannot get defensive at that time and just say, hey, you're really hurting, what's going on? Something is happening above and beyond what's happening between us. You look really stricken. So the person kind of makes room for the person to say, well, they might even come back with, no, you did it. No, you did it to me. And it's saying, listen, I'm here. I'm not being defensive. I just want to hear you out. You're not the same. Something shifted in you. And if that person can be present and non-accusatory and not reactive, often that person will say, you're right. I don't know what's going on with me. I feel so upset and so distressed, much more beyond what is happening between us. If they've practiced this before, that partner can say, how old do you feel? And if the person says, I feel about 4 or something like that, well, what happened to you when you were 4? Who am I right now for you that you're projecting those feelings and that pain and that sorrow onto me? Who was it? Was there anybody around to help you? Did the situation get resolved? Did the person apologize to you? Did you understand that maybe that person's an alcoholic and talking out of turn and doesn't really feel that way? Did anybody help you understand it? As I said, was there any resolution? Or if you've been holding on to that your whole life, still hurting you deep inside and not able to be expressed until I said something in some way that reminded you of that experience. Can you talk to me about it? Can we go back and share it together so that I can support you and love you through it and not take it personally because it's not meant for me?
So
Now
those
that happens best when that other person, again, is not traumatized. For instance, if it activates that person's trauma, a 4-year-old can then say to the other person, you don't ever understand. And then all of a sudden, that person regresses into a parent that individual was never good enough for. And now we've got 2 people, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they're trying to resolve their current situation. It is literally impossible. And when that happens, I can promise you that will happen over and over and over again. They'll have the same argument. It'll end in the same way. They both get wounded and hurt, and they go back and reestablish the boundaries of the initial trauma. So people can actually cause each other pain and more regression.
so those are examples that you showed us um through the experience that you've had, right?
Oh, yes, I could give you dozens, but let me just give you a couple just to maybe help illustrate the point that I'm trying to make. About a third of women comment that they've had some kind of sexual abuse growing up, and about 1 out of 7 men. It's obviously and painfully too common. But a woman will have had some kind of incestual experience, perhaps by a father, an uncle, a stranger, whatever it is. And she's in the process of making love with her partner. And the partner says something about, I just love the way how soft your skin is. It's like a baby skin. It's so beautiful. It just turns me on. And maybe the person that molested her said exactly the same thing in exactly the same tone. That woman will freeze. She's unable to respond. She's absolutely carried back to the original experience. She turns cold. She cannot continue the lovemaking process at all. She turns away. How could you call me that? How could you talk to me that way? That is absolutely terrible. Why would you focus on my skin when we were? And he's like, whoa, wait a minute. I was just trying to tell you something beautiful about you. No, you were focusing on my skin and we were doing fine. And all of a sudden the other person, if he sees that reaction, if they understand and he says, honey, this is a strong response to what I said, something else must be going on. Talk to me about it. What did you really hear me saying? Who do you think I was? How was I hurting you in some way? Help me understand this better. She will often, and I've seen this happen, begin to just sob, just to sob. And then if he takes her in his arms and becomes that better pseudo-parental figure, hey, it's all going to be okay. We're going to make this better. It's all right. I don't have to say those things, but you have to help me understand those phrases or those behaviors that might trigger that trauma, because I can stop right away and I can care for you, and maybe we can heal this backwards. So that would be like one example. Now, maybe another example would be that, they're having an argument in some kind or a stressful interaction, and the woman says to her partner, or female or male partner, you just never get me. It's all about you. It's always all about you. How come you can never leave your own point of reference and just understand how it's making me feel? You're so selfish. It's all about you. And then all of a sudden, he goes back to being a child when he had a father that he was never good enough for. And the father would say to him over and over again, all you think about is yourself. All you think about is yourself. All you think about is yourself. And then all of a sudden, he's that little boy, 8, 9, 10 years old, saying, I'm never good enough for you. What about when I wash your car? What about if it takes it very personally? What about when I pick your parents up at the airport and I try to make sure you have enough money? And she's saying, you don't understand, you don't understand, you don't understand. You just, and you don't listen. And he's saying, yes, I do listen. And all of a sudden they're in an argument that has no chance of being won because he's only 8 or 9 years old. And he's fighting for his very life, for his sanity, for his value as a human being. And she's only pointing out what he did wrong in the moment that she's mad at. But they're spiraling downward like a plane on fire. And again, it will end with they're both getting angry, they'll disconnect, and then all of a sudden everybody gets grown up again. And often they don't even talk about it again. Or if they do, the very same traumatic interaction begins. Well, what if she had a trauma? What if when she tried to tell somebody you're being mean to me, they said, you're too sensitive. I wasn't being mean to you. Now, all of a sudden, she's spiraling down and she's feeling like, that her parents would never let her talk or never have a voice because they always say she took things too personally. So now she's spiraling down. What age is she? Maybe 5. Now we have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. How are they going to resolve anything in the present? So these regressions can be horrendous interruptions in quality communication, where neither person even understands why. But I see it happen all the time. I've watched it in my office. I've heard people talk about it. And I'll often say to them, how old did you feel? And they know immediately. I felt like a little kid. No, you didn't feel like a little kid. You were a little kid. It's not like you're feeling about it. It's not like you're just remembering it. You're regressing. That is different than remembering. Remembering is open to logical conversation. Oh, I remember when my dad used to do that. You can resolve that. But when you become that age, no, you can't. Does that make sense? I mean, can you understand the difference between those two?
It's really interesting, and I think these articles hit a lot of people because at one point or another, there's some sort of past experience that somewhat determines what you are now. I mean, we're all baked from the past.
Even more so, we are all the ages we've ever been. We just know where we are right now, but people can trigger us into any age at any time because all those ages and all those memories are inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
They can be activated at any time. So people need to know that and need to be recognized that in themselves.
Wow. Wow, that's a great article, and I'm so glad that we can hear from you, the author, the writer of this article in voice.
Well, I hope so, honey, because when I help people understand this, you'd be just amazed at how much better that communication gets. Now, remember, it's very dependent on people are willing, even if it's humiliating or embarrassing, willing at best they can to tell their partner what traumas they have experienced, so the partner is going to be more able to recognize it when it happens.
Right. Okay, Dr. Randi, I think we've reached the end of our show or our podcast, and we will do it again And this is going to be great for anybody that really is your fan, which I am, and also for people that might, pass and visit your website through social media and learn from you. But thank you so much, Dr. Randy.
My pleasure, Ryan. Thank you. Looking forward to the next time.